I thought it was hell at first. I could hear voices crying loudly through the gelatinous mass I was encased in. Hands were beating on the outside. Some dug at me. I found that I was becoming free naturally, though. As if by the flick of a switch, I felt the cold of the world again. The crying became cheers. I was on a wooden stage. Immediately around me were men in combat armor with yellow stripes painted across plates and pouches. I remembered who I was. I remembered where I was. I almost looked back, in case I had missed the turn-off for hell after all. I was amid a scene of jubilation beneath a choppy grey sky that oscillated and swelled like the ocean. I was naked, although the guys around me were now dressing me in a black jumpsuit. I couldn't move, and something behind me was keeping me upright. Various people were asking me if I could see them, understand them, and waving in my face in an irritating fashion. I continued failing to speak. With great effort, I was able to cast my eyes about, which prompted an uproarious cheer. There were overgrown concrete buildings around us and tall metal watchtowers lined with unhealthy-looking civilians, or stalkers too poor to even have a balaclava to their name. Something that looked like seaweed was floating in the air in meters-long strands, seemingly stuck to flickering patches of space. There was a huge tank on a road nearby. The stage I stood on smelled new. I remembered something, then looked around the stage more closely. The stalkers disappeared. I looked to each corner, as well as I could. There was someone else here. Someone was sitting cross-legged beside my left leg. It didn't look like Rho at all. "Rho," I said. The stalkers reappeared, then faded back out. The person beside me stood up. I got the strong feeling that it was Rho, but they had no appearance. That is to say, I found that my mind couldn't decide what I was seeing. Flashes of that child's jumper, stretched over a lanky frame, were mixed with other recognizable looks and faces, none of which could command a name from me. Then I noticed something similar about them all. They all had that torn-off piece of shawl that Rho wore over their right leg, an old Cossack pattern, white on blue, fixed onto the belt strap like the beginnings of a skirt. So it was Rho, or something similar. The stalkers reappeared with a bolt of pain. Something was being strapped onto my legs. I had more control now, and wiggled against the large number of gloved hands holding me in place. The sound of an electric drill drowned out whatever these people were talking about. I noticed there was someone lying on the ground next to me, with a few of those civilians clasping them. More things were strapped to me, and that funerary scene was swept away by more kitted-out stalkers. By then I had clocked that these were zoners. Those yellow stripes were their brand. I also ruled out my first guess for where I was. It wasn't the Brain Scorcher. This was a more substantial facility, with hangars, roads, and a big wall on high ground that blocked views in any direction I could survey. I realized that the voices closest to me were encouraging me to wake up and move. My muscles were mixed on the idea. Somehow though, while I didn't feel my legs do much of anything, I undeniably stepped forward. Another cheer erupted, garnished with calls that I was certainly alive. The grubby audience bounced around with glee rarely seen outside of a betting shop. More voices told me to keep moving. I clenched my left hand. I thought I had lost it, and indeed, what I had there did not feel like it was mine at all. It functioned, roughly. I stepped side to side and turned around to see a wooden post with a rack of loose ropes on stakes. The stage had no back to it. However, there was something built alongside it, intended to be part of this strange show. Hanging over us all was a tall shelf, fashioned from different stretches of household furniture. It bore 9 empties. An empty was a common and recognizable artifact, known for its great capacity to withstand physical pressure and little else. It was probably the least interesting artifact one could find, and the safest. So why was a display of them sitting there like a crown over my stage of rebirth? And more important than all of this, where was Rho? Rho, I said. I definitely said it out loud. The zoners around me scurried off the stage at this secret word, leaving a clear view of the one person who remained. A man in a tan jumpsuit sat in a wheelchair. His lower left leg was missing. It wasn't Rho, it was Wasp. "I told you it would work," he said to the onlookers. "Tell us your name, Stalker," he added to me. "Rho?" I said, not in answer to the question, but getting polite applause. I suppose it was the right line after all. "Rho, Rho, you returned to us," Wasp acted. "No," I said. Wasp waited for me to say more. So did I. I noticed audible gunfire that had been there the whole time. Likewise, far from the stage, there were people loading gear onto trucks, BTRs, and a variety of civilian vehicles of tear-shaped design. The sight was so harrowingly familiar that my voice was hauled up to my mouth. "Rho isn't here," I said. "Not now. You only got me." Prompted by my own words, I looked down at myself. I was wreathed in metal rods and black pads. When I thought to move my arms, and the feeling was dampened into submission by my dead nerves, the rods whirred and buzzed to give me something like what I'd wanted. I'd seen stalkers using something like this, but this was more complex than a mere exoskeleton. It was anomalous technology, a term that would soon come to mean more, although given the circumstances of this absurd scene, it would be fine to go the rest of one's life without knowing of such flash-in-the-pan designs. Wasp finally blabbed a prepared reel of remarks. "We have to be quick about getting you up and about now, as the time of reckoning is upon us, as they say. It's hardly any different to the usual fare, between you and me. But as you can see, we've many refugees from the real world on our hands. Believe it or not, by some mad twist of ET's plans, it's safer in here than it is out there. Or in other words, the real world is an absolute war zone. I haven't seen any of it myself, of course, being rather stuck in this chair. That suit was going to be for me, you know, and I was glad as a goose to have a better use for it when you came along. Ah yes, I should explain that too. You can walk, I trust." This trust was misplaced. With discomfort, I was able to shuffle off the stage at Wasp's direction and follow him down the crowded road, the suit doing most of the work. I told myself I'd better get used to the literally disjointed feeling of it. I was receiving plenty of well wishes from the stalkers, and the civilians just looked on hungrily. "It's a dire situation," Wasp went on. "You've seen the trouble it causes when a handful of stalkers go turncoat. Imagine entire cities changing into whatever the aliens want, then being left to fight like animals. Makes me glad we've only got the bloodsuckers to worry about here, really. Although we've seen some rarer things coming to the surface more and more. Duty did have some good ideas in the end, eh? That whole belt is falling apart. And by last count, we've got a few hours until the unlimited beasts of the world get here. Funny, eh? Sorry to wake you up with such bad news. It was our last chance, and we didn't really think it would work. Ah yes, you saw the empties back there, didn't you? You'll never guess. It's a foul thing, really. I'd wager you'd be better off not knowing. The short of it is that they can be filled after all. Think of them as an artificial rib cage, yes. You can fill them up with working organs, and then you keep them close by for a spell, and they begin to work for you. So you weren't really dead, not for long. We managed to get you new organs, in a sense. Each time there's a new set, the old doc, rest his soul, said there was a chance you'd completely reboot and come back to us. It didn't work, until it did. Funny how things are always like that, eh? And how different today is to yesterday, the old saying and such. Right, Pavel's around here somewhere. We've set up horns for this, and once they go off it will be a mess. As for you, head up there. You see it? Wasp indicated one of the BTRs queued by the main gate in the outer wall. Military stalkers were crawling all over it, and the concrete roadblocks were being forklifted out of the way. There were 4 other BTRs, and a tank was trundling from a side street to join us. The civilians were restless, likely sensing that something conclusive was about to occur. The sounds of shooting still spiced the gusting wind. A stalker, Pavel, wheeled Wasp off towards a brick building nearby. I could see more zoners bringing out metal trunks through a collapsed section of the wall. From all that I was seeing, hearing, and feeling, I chiseled out the realization that I was witnessing the last evacuation of humankind. It seemed too peaceful for that, yet that was what it was. The zoners weren't especially fussed, although from the smell I learned there wasn't much sobriety about them. What luck. I was beckoned over to that BTR, and at once people ordered each other to do various things for me. I was given a drink myself, provided a camping chair to sit on while they cleaned the inside of the vehicle, and then saw my old pack being rudely dragged across the long grass from a nearby barrack. The G-36 was buckled to the side. The zoner had brought my old clothes too, which weren't of any use now. I was invited to take what I wanted from a trunk of rations. They had enough to feed this base several times over. Supplies had come ahead of the civilians, and then not all of the mouths made it. That was about as happy as the news got. So I sat, tried some of the vodka, and sausages dipped in hummus, tearfully good, as I watched the party winding down. Many zoners asked after Rho, or implied that I was Rho. It felt like Rho was around here somewhere, and I was simply hearing the soldiers speak to them. Whatever the case, the notion that Rho was with us seemed to have been accepted quite quickly. And there I was, feeling absolutely alone inside an anomalous tech suit, being powered by the sounds of it by an invisible store of spare organs, kept inside and empty over there. I wouldn't recommend the feeling. Some of the civilians were fleeing the base ahead of us. No one was stopping them, although some watched with interest. This base was on top of a hill, and the painterly world of the inner zone stretched out all the way to the wall. Here the sloshing of the land matched that of the sky. It was a few kilometers from here to the wall, supposedly, although no one had checked since yesterday. The last group that left the base was not slated to return. They were the source of the gunfire to the south, and the reason we were alive here today. No one seemed especially impressed by the heroism of that. I think the end of the world had really sunk its teeth into these zoners, and only the civilians believed there was any hope. No, our journey now was not truly an evacuation, but a pilgrimage. A trip to the shrine of ET to ask that now they're done with this game of theirs, they clear up their mess and let peace reign, for all of the instantaneously processed speck of unrealized time between now and the last spark of the last photon in a universe spread thin as it matters to be. With such an analysis complete in my head, I looked to the seat beside me. "The wish granter is still there. I checked," Rho reported. I let out a long breath. They looked normal. "You're still here too," I replied. "Both of us are. You heard them all. It's good luck, really. I thought we might be done for. It was nice to think about it for a while. Still, we should get back to work. That end of the world's going to make it a real crowd once we get there, isn't it?" "Bro, I have no idea." "Good. I'm still in business then, bro." I shared a smile with Rho that very much brought everything back to alignment. We both knew what we had to do, and in that regard nothing had changed. Everything happening around us was someone else's doomed business. We had an appointment to keep. Yes, I was so excited I wanted to get out and walk, and would have if a squad of zoners hadn't been in the process of bringing their packs and themselves into the compartment. I was glad to have a brand new mask over my face. Rho said they'd been checking the place out. They claimed to have woken up before I did. The place being reality in general. "No world left. It's even worse than these people think. It got worse since they left. It's all an experiment now for the ones who stayed behind." "What experiment is that?" "It's like dancing, if you've never seen it before. You have to experiment. Well, they're the optimistic ones. The rest of the aliens weren't happy at all. I think we might have hurt them, bro." "You seem happy about that." "Only because I know how to make it right." "Anything I can do?" "In a sense. What they need is me." "Zone preservers. You can't see past yourself." "Actually, I can, thanks to you. It's ET who can't. That's what they worry about. Yes. "What are you going to do?" "I'll decide. I'll tell you later." "You'd better." "Yes, master." Yeah. So, Rho was back in the swing of things. I wasn't quite used to being alive again, but hey, seems you never really forget it. Once the zoners were done packing, there was a rush to set the convoy off. In between the bustle, I finally found someone who spoke Ukrainian and had some of the gaps filled in. It began with the largest emission of them all, one that to some degree had never ceased. It happened perhaps 20 years in the future, or to the guy telling it 3 months ago. Chaos reigned, and there was little he could do to describe it. There was something he called a reduction field, that I believe was like the psi fields the IEC had categorized. Most went mad and ceased to be anything truly human. The lucky ones were medicated against it. Their fates were now dispersed between underground layers, last stand forts all over the world, and for the crazy few, last-ditch attempts to reach the supposed salvation of the alien alters here in the zone. People had flown in from all over the world to be here at the very end, and really I didn't pity them, for most people out there would never get that option to begin with. The Ukrainian had no faith in those who'd taken themselves underground, on account of the Earth being easy for the ghosts to move around in. That checked out with my experiences. Given that this fairy tale from a long-forgotten land of 2 decades hence was true, what do we do about that? We go to the power plant and see if there's an off switch. Well, that wasn't Rho and I's plan, of course, but we went along with the spirit of it. Zoner parties had been pushing that way for weeks, driving Monolith back. The short route, though, was a no-go. Everyone who went straight from the rear side of the wall to the plant was taken up into the sky, and there they stayed. Rho was excited to hear we might see them there, at which I gave a performative sigh. The zoners ricocheted off any dourness the thought conjured. Then came the good news. Some advanced groups had charted the Monolith road to Pripyat, and returned to tell the tale. With Monolith now a dying breed, the city might be pierced if enough gusto were applied. From within, the plant could be approached from another direction, and the probability of dying on that route was deemed lower than 100%, making it in theory the safest place in the entire world, in present circumstances. So that was what we, as a species, had left on the docket. Weird thing is, it's easier in here than out there now, another guy claimed in English. Most of the anomalies quietened down, and you don't see mutants here anymore, apart from the invasion force. That's because the aliens left here, stopped off out there on the way. Their experiments with stalkers are over, Rho said. No one seemed to think much of that bold statement. It was so bad, the Ukrainian went on. They turned every dog into this, every cat into that, and people too. Those are the bad ones. Always was, rookie, an apparently veteran stalker chuckled. Vodka was offered and I took it. There were bangs on the outside of the vehicle, and with a jolt we began to move. The doors were left open, and the hatch to the mounted cannon gave me a view of the blending clouds. It felt nice to be driven. 2 guys next to me started dancing around and singing something about a mambo. I liked the idea. No sense being too grim about it. We cleared the gateway with a cheer. Civilians streamed out with us. The zoners were shouting words of encouragement to them, and advised to seek the power plant and stop at nothing to get there. It was nice that some effort was being made in between the nihilism and smoking. I wondered if the drivers knew the way, or had any chance of driving through the surrealist wasteland of the inner zone at all. From what I could tell through the open doors, things were calmer than before. The civilians turned off the road to follow the chain of yellow-tipped posts, most of them anyway. We soon lost sight of them behind hills and the wreckage of 1,000 helicopter crashes. Evidently lots of work had gone into clearing the road for us. I saw Wasp waving to me from the gunner position of the BTR behind us, so he could still stand up when he really wanted to. There's really no explaining how stupid this all felt. After all our pain, balancing our world on a knife's edge, here we were being driven to Pripyat through a zone too old and senile to care anymore, while, less than a mile distant, creatures broken by the insidious indifference of alien gods stomped forwards. The question was, were they actually coming here for us, or for the gods? To some extent, it didn't matter. We merely had to reach the power plant first, Rho and I. A nod to Rho confirmed it. Nothing had changed at all. A happy note to chime amid this last exhalation of the zone was that space-time no longer had any interest in twisting and changing. This meant that the route the zoners had prepared in recent weeks remained clear of debris, mutants, zombies, and mind-wrenching whispers from other realities. Old Yosefka could have driven through the canyon wall and into Monolith lands with little more than a stern strike of the ever-stoic gearbolt. We had some boys in the town before. Monolith are still prowling, hunting. Their pets too, the Ukrainian guy said to me, translating the Pole relaying this fresh rumour. The Pole was a newcomer and an army trooper from the last crusade, a fresh face indeed. I told both speakers that I knew what we were getting into, and they believed me. This infantry compartment we were shoved into didn't offer much in the way of views, and we had closed the doors as we entered the canyon. One of the soldiers was looking through the viewfinder on the Shipanov cannon and whirring it left and right. He was quoting movies in English to himself as he did so, enviably aloof. That and the engine growling provided the backdrop for the constant rattling of the BTR on the torn-up road. The mood was starting to sour. I felt immensely vulnerable and decided to keep my eyes and ears closed. Rho mumbled nonsense to me as a distraction. Someone mentioned that the 4 orbs were still there at the Brain Scorcher. This got me curious enough to peek through the narrow embrasure behind my head. We were right beside the Scorcher facility. The towers were all gone, and indeed the metal orbs sat there in the sky. It must be so easy for them. We drove on past it and up a hill, passing the edge of the Red Forest. Our destination was not Pripyat itself, since that was too quick a death for us. Instead, we were going to an old tunnel west of the town that led through its industrial metro. A zoner named Lukash had claimed it would allow us to climb up into town behind Monolith's front line, then we'd make a break for the big prize. As if our noisy, populous convoy, traversing the last working roads in the world, stood a chance of going unnoticed. The Pole apparently explained how doing this was more noble than shooting yourself, which I gathered had been a popular recourse when the end crept too close. We were the optimists then, and weren't we all glad for it? In that vein, the uncomfortable mood began to lift the longer we drove through the inner zone. Nothing untoward happened at all. My only complaint was that it got too hot. Oh, and I didn't know whose body I was in. The zoners opened the rear door to reveal fields of peaceful grass alongside the road. We were finishing up our circumvention of Pripyat, and the evil aura of the border with our neck of the woods was absent. A few anomalies here and there, no more dangerous than the very fringes of the zone. However, the mutant population was thriving. When they took interest in our convoy, we had to adjust our formation to cover the civilian vehicles behind. The Shipanov thundered out bursts, its gunner screaming with delight. There were bloodsuckers, flesh, snorks, lost ones, double rats, sunbats, and something the zoners didn't have a name for, described as being a human eel that ran on its flippers. It would have been nice to stop and check its corpse. On we went though, until we reached an extensive sewage treatment works on a ridge. On the other side, the road dipped down in between a network of canals and overflow drains, then hooked around to reveal a set of 4 railways running out of a big door in the hillside. We were cordially invited outside, and a perimeter was formed around this railhead. The tank settled its gun on the closed door, ready for mischief. 40 zoners, twice as many civilians, with not enough masks and too many guns, and a handful of stalkers not wearing zoner colours. What a species we'd been. Wasp wheeled himself up to me. After some pleasantries, he said, "I trust that Rho did find his way with us." "Yes, I'm okay now," Rho said. Wasp slapped his arm of the chair. "Then the world isn't over yet." Others came over to share in this delight, and I must admit I found the idea agreeable. "I will save you all," Rho eventually declared, "but on one condition. You have to let me go first." This was precisely what everyone wanted to hear. Rho was praised as the emissary of the gods, various different characterizations from these well-to-do civilians flowed, and we even got a few tasty morsels from the pantries of the future. I was more interested in their strange cloud-like vehicles. However, a clock was ticking in one direction or another, so we took off with the boldest zoners to investigate the tunnel. A door on the side let us in. We ascended a windowed stairwell to begin our search for door controls. Despite my promise to lead, I was walking 3 back from the first stalker. But at the top, I was alone. I looked back. Everyone was gone. With a sigh, I flicked the safety on the G36 and asked Rho what was happening. They emerged from around a corner ahead of me and said, "This isn't our space. We can't all go in. Be careful. Killing you will ease their pain." I had rounded that corner and emerged onto a walkway above the railway hall. The doors were below me, and another set blocked the tunnel onwards. Dead trains sat down there, deep in the shadows slipping from the mouldy strip of windows above the outer doors. I blinked. I was outside. No one else was out here, although the vehicles were all in position. "Go back in again," Rho prompted impatiently from nearby. I asked no questions and re-entered the tunnel, up the stairs, around the corner, and into the hall. Something clanked below me. One of the abandoned trains pounced off its rails, and I was outside again. "Did you see it?" Rho asked. "What's happening?" I asked back. "Look closer in there. They want to kill you, but they can't." Rho flashed a smile. "Our life creates the uncertainty for the future of the zone that allows them to use their powers. Trust me, I've been studying it." "Studying what?" "The universe." "So, there's someone like you in there?" No, a rock person. I forget what you call them. Kill them already. I'll worry about what's happening to the real humans." "Thanks, bro." "That's right, bro. Cheer up. Kill them all, go on." Rho was having a great time. I think it was the sunshine. I went in again. When I reached the hall, I peered carefully around the door. Movement. First at the far end of the room, then right below the walkway. 2 targets. The second was looking at me. It was the stony face of the creature we'd seen on our first day, Buras. The most dangerous alien creation of them all, for it remained the most human. 2 short, fat men in oversized black coats, with bodies of stone, and arms that thinned to brown pegs poking at me from their gaping sleeves. The trains twitched, and I pulsed backward out of their sight. A huge amount of debris and metal fragments stormed against the doorway. I fell back further. However, I was stopped, as if by an anchor. The G36 was moving on its own towards the hall. It began to pull me along with it. The draw was irresistible. Once something has been somewhere, it's recorded. It can be brought back there at any other time, really, because of how ET understands the state of time as a whole, Rho explained. They were stood in the doorway, the barrage of bolts and bars ricocheting off them harmlessly. It got me angry, seeing that. "Deal with them!" I commanded. Rho refused. I realized they weren't actually there, leaving me angry at myself. Once the G36 reeled me close to the door, Rho faded away. I let go of the weapon and watched it carry on. It got stuck on the junk now blocking the door. I heard footsteps on the walkway out there. I pulled out my USP and took cover at a corner nearby. I was up against a window through which I saw Rho pretending to look at their watch in front of the doors. They had gotten worse while I was dead. Or we were dead, perhaps, still haven't decided which. The footsteps stopped. I was ready to shoot the debris if they climbed through, and equally ready to launch myself to the ground. My exoskeleton was fast. I'd learned that much in this skirmish. I didn't hear anything else for a while. I was certain they'd come up close to the doorway. I thought that if I got close to the debris, there might be some narrow gap through it all to shoot them without them seeing me, as if they needed to see me. "Are you there?" a deep voice said from the debris. When I didn't reply, the Bureau started tapping on the metal on the other side. "No one ever said they could talk," Rho said from behind me. "Says you," I shot back. "You're not supposed to be here," the Bureau said. Its voice was friendly, I thought. "Neither are you," Rho shouted out before I could stop them. "You have touched that thing, the whole universe," the voice said. It sounded like it was moving pieces of the debris aside, and the whole pile trembled as its balance changed. "You are not part of the future anymore. That is why you are able to come here. You are not predestined like everything should be." "Stay back," I warned. The Bureau's digging carried on, as did its comment. "Two you may be here. Not in the universe, that place they took us all. You would be one to them. That is quite fascinating for those for whom the notion of being one is so alien. That irony of their predicament is powerful. They are so much the same being as each other that they wish dreadfully to be free, to break away from a great mistake that tore the page of their past, a past they've lost. So they turn to you two, and what is that like for them? A painting of a fantasy, a dream they can reach into and feel for clues. Where are they now, then? Alas, there was little to be found inside of any of us here. When I think of this, I wonder if we should apologize. By now, the Bureau had cleared a space for itself to slip into the room, moving right across my frozen iron sights. I couldn't move, gripped by that voice. Its mouth, the crevasse in its face, had no part in creating the sound, yet the eyes conducted the syllables in perfect time. You can go to Pripyat, yes, you can go there. We come and go freely, and have ever since we were returned here. Few remain. It is the fate of the mind left behind when a person changes to fester, and with the power of the alien beasts and their wish-granter, here we stay. Here we stay. Don't worry, it's almost over, Rho said. Then they placed their hand on my shoulder. I found that I could move. Now, do it! Rho shouted. I swung the USP around and put the whole magazine through the Bureau's face, its eyes bursting and its body rolling to the floor. Are you... I began to ask Rho, but I was picked up and dragged through the wall beside the door to the main hall. The shattering of concrete didn't feel like much on the bones of this AT suit. Soldiers of the future had it easy, and they still failed. I tumbled along the walkway, then fell to the den of trains below. The USP was long gone. I got to my feet again and wiped dirt from my visor. I saw a gas canister racing towards me, tall as a man. I span around the edge of a resting train with a burst of the skeleton's power. Again, it was faster than I'd thought. It seemed to move as fast as I could command it. I dropped my pack, opened the top, and pulled out a grenade. By the time I realized that was unlikely to work, the train at my back was shaking on its rails. I grabbed for the knife at my left shoulder and missed it. The webbing over my brutish armor had everything in a different place. I threw myself to the floor and realized that I didn't feel especially disconnected from Rho, despite the circumstances. It was refreshing. Rho was standing in the door up there, watching blankly. I thought that I could have avoided this situation, most likely, with Rho's help. Yet their help had me here. The train was smashing those high windows, then it rolled down over me. I sprinted clear of the fall, then I hadn't. That is to say, I saw myself back lying underneath the train, then free, then trapped, then free. I was seeing 2 times, 2 courses, and like the call of a deep sleep, I wanted to be back over there being crushed. I was being stretched from life to death, and of course the Bureau was standing right there, with a raised limb puppeteering this torture. We should never have been, it said to me. But we are, Rho shouted from up high. And our wish will make sure that no one is cursed to know the world as it is, never to lose touch with the unknown, and to be able to let go and fall away from their terror into the blissful known. That didn't sound like my wish, but right then I wished I existed in a single place and time. I got the wish. Rho fired the G-36 from the hip and missed most of the shots. 1 or 2 tore the Bureau's coat and cracked pieces of stone from its skin. I felt whole again, my sprint forward successfully written into the timeline. The whole space was filling with disturbed dust, and my suit was growing hot. I wished that I had the G-36 there myself, and there it was. I pulled a magazine from my webbing. The Bureau rose both arms at me and waddled closer. I felt like I had blades stabbing my insides, and in a moment I would see why. For the time being, I leveled the muzzle and gave the Bureau 30 AP rounds, fresh from the armories of 2020. Its head was disfigured, and it ceased to be a threat. With a strange pop of my diaphragm, the pain inside was gone. The ground shook. Beneath me, the projectile train was settling into place. The top end of my corpse stuck from underneath. I reloaded and focused the G36 on it, on me. "Oh, that's a mean trick," Rho said of it while they climbed down a ladder. I got close enough to confirm it was me, and confirm this me was dead. If I had an empty and shaman Wasp to use it, maybe more organs could be sourced for me. Still, the other me that is, felt perfectly fine. Rho encouraged me to ignore the mix-up here, and I couldn't think of a better idea. We searched the place for controls, and ultimately got the lights all burning bright and all the doors rolling open. We rounded the fallen train to get outside. There, the zoners were watching one of the BTRs towing another overturned train engine out of the way. It was the same train engine that had just killed me, I thought, until I looked back and saw that it and my grisly end were gone. The Bureau corpse had been tidied away with it. I ended up asking after what the zoners thought had happened, and their report was that Rho and I had run off on our own, leaving them to open the doors and clear the way for the vehicles. I didn't bother to tell them what we thought happened, to the extent I even did think it happened. My USP was still gone though, as was the 556 ammo Rho and I had used. "That is what the Wish Granter can do. It doesn't have to make any sense, and its power is passed around here and there. ET can't control it. They never really could," Rho explained to me over a drink in the fresh air. "Is that why you can shoot now?" I asked. "Not out here. This is different now," Rho quickly said. "Making excuses?" "Not me. The world decides. No, the universe decides. That's what that man meant. The universe. It was the thing we were exposed to. It's what the aliens have in their heads, which lets them know everything. Well, not everything, which is the whole problem." "The universe is the whole problem," I summarized. "Precisely," Rho nodded. "Can't fault it on technicality. All problems are in the universe somewhere." "Somewhere, that's the key point," Rho said with a jump. "The aliens aren't sure how things ended up like this. They know it was because they did something bad, but they forgot." "Yeah? And they don't want that?" "They don't know. You want to help them forget it for good. Is that... Did you change your wish to that?" "I can't say. But in there you said your wish would stop people being cursed to know the world. The universe, is it?" "I don't mean people. I think, bro, that there are many facets to our wishes which can all be achieved. You see, the Wish Granter won't care, even if the wishes are contradictory. That's the strange thing. That's what the aliens forgot about, I think. They don't understand things like that." "Lucky you do then." "That's what I'm thinking," Rho mused, poking their lips with a grubby finger. We both jolted when the zoners at the perimeter shot something over there. "We'll be talking about this again," I said. Rho nodded and cleared the drinks away for me. Our break ended and the convoy set off into the railway tunnel. The civilians were on the verge of nervous breakdowns, taking some persuading to stay in their vehicles and crawl along behind the BTRs, the tank intimidating them from the rear. A fire team on foot jogged along at the back. They almost closed the tunnel doors behind us before Wasp intervened by screaming at them. I think we should have closed them. The tunnels were old, dusty, and full of snorks. The zoners wasted no time in shooting any that came close, so stealth finally tipped off the table. It was better than the usual snork shootout, since the tunnels were wide, with roads beside the railways and plenty of operational lighting. It was the most habitable place we'd seen inside the zone, but that record was due to be broken again shortly. The real watch topic was Monolith, whose soldiers had plenty of places to hide. The tunnels were feathered with passages, alcoves, and featureless, unmarked doors. It was a relief to pass each, but the threat of deadly egress at our back loomed larger each time. And yet, things remained tauntingly easy. We progressed to the final leg of our journey. The tunnel opened up to a huge domed cavern, as beautifully wrought as any religious wonder, all the more so for having a city supported right on top of it. That much was clear from a break in the ceiling where the concrete had failed. We could see the red sky and apartment buildings. Once we had bumped our way over the crisscrossing rails here and parked at the dead end beyond, Rho insisted I look closer at that hole. I got out and peered up. Orange ghosts lined the break like an eyelash. A grey tower blocked out the sky. The cenotaph. I stared at it for long enough to get the zoners hassling me to hurry up. They saw nothing, Rho claimed. They hardly looked, and for good reason. Who couldn't have felt the danger closing in on us? There were windows high up around this dark dome, impossible to see through from here. Echoes of groaning metal whispered in the depth of the tunnel we'd travelled through. There were more tunnels here, all firmly shut. Some tunnels were even above us, with cranes positioned to lift carriages up there. A design bureau somewhere had real fun putting this place together. Good for them. The plan was to embark up a stairwell and leave a handful of zoners to watch the vehicles and await news. Our supplies and civilians would be left here for the most part. Wasp was planning to have the civilians eventually haul the crates to the surface. He remained below and gave us a wink as we joined the away team. "You've got it in you, lads," he said. He pointed at us with a shaking hand. "I've not seen the last of you, eh?" The best answer I had was to shake my head. I hurried to be among the first ascending the stairs. We could see all the way up the middle of the well. The light was different at the top, suggesting it would take us right outside. "They know we're here," Rho whispered to me. "The main thing will be to get away. This town is full of ghosts, more than I've felt anywhere. They're excited about us. I think we'll get through this, you and I." "I think so too," I said. It felt good to be honest. The stairs were no match for my anomalous legs. The rest of the zoners were huffing by the end. The top loomed. We gathered ourselves together, prepared our weapons, and then pushed up the final flight to see what the zone had in store this time. The open door at the final stair was only wide enough to leave one at a time. By the time it was my turn to pass through it, it was covered in blood. We'd arrived in Pripyat. We looked out upon a green space with children's playthings. No cover. Apartment blocks flanked this quad to all sides. My echo detector was chirping inside my bag. The zoner who'd left first was reeling into the air, tumbling and hollering, blood spraying festively from his mouth. His gear thumped down next to us as we were pushed out underneath him. Those zoners emerging behind shouted and someone fired their weapon. At this, gunfire erupted from the apartment blocks and cut around the park hotly. "Move fast!" Rho commanded. I obeyed, as did my suit. I moved to a tunnel through the apartments nearest the metro exit. There was another park with a rotten arts centre there. The ghosts were clustered in the windows, staring at me with their full attention. I heard something I thought was familiar, a sound like air bursting from a plastic tube. Rho told me what it was, the sound of alien awareness breaking off between nowhere in particular and somewhere close. The sky flashed red and the cenotaph appeared. It covered the sky with no top in sight. It grew, then departed with another melodic whooshing. A snap, then a crackle of pops. I was winded by the sight of the skybound zoner expanding and morphing into a prism, his stretched face imaged on one side. It was cracking as both the zoners and whoever was in the apartments sprayed it. We didn't stay to watch. We'd known this would be how the first moments went long before we arrived. I oriented us towards where the cenotaph had been and set off at a jog. I made no effort to hide us or scan the area for danger. Why? Because I felt strongly that all the danger wasn't for me. We were close to the edge of the town, surrounded by residential blocks. It was a pleasant-looking town, very modern, giving as much space to pedestrians like us as to the zigzagging roads. Shame about the extraterrestrials coming in and ruining everything, and the noise. A beam of light strafed the road ahead of us. The prism man had risen above the buildings and shone brightly under the clear sky. It moved neatly to be directly above us, at which point I dragged Rho aside and through the smashed glass of a Brezhnevka lobby. "I understand," Rho declared. "They want to split us apart. A prism." "Then stay close," I barked. We went up the stairs. Each rotation gave us a chance to check a window. I didn't see the prism, but I could see a monolith soldier on an opposite roof, holding his hand up towards the sky in our direction. I decided we should go to the roof ourselves. I shot 3 cydogs that interfered from the hallways at our flanks, or 3 cydog memories. I edged the door to the roof open. The prism was above the roof. Monolith soldiers were everywhere, their arms raised to the prism with hands open wide, less reaching for it, more keeping it away. This scene was only there for a moment. I was dragged through the door by a ripple of space, leaving Rho on the stairs behind me. I twisted around to see them. They drew further away than the distance should have allowed. I tumbled into the monolith soldiers, who grabbed onto me. The world curled into a ball and rolled over me. I was nowhere in particular. I was on the roof again. Hands still gripped me all over. I shuffled free, in doing so waking up the figures around me. They were dressed in civilian clothing, no masks, no helmets, no guns. I looked up. A smaller green orb hung where the prism had been, rotating gently like a gaseous planet. I made the connection that these orbs were in several places within view, moving around in the sky, sometimes shimmering or glowing. The people around me backed away quickly and looked at each other for comfort. They were not even stalkers, let alone monolith. They said not a word. I called out for Rho. The people here slipped into those round bubbles of space, monolith magic, and immediately they were gone. I marched to the edge of the roof and looked down into the street. I saw regular people walking here and there. The generous pavements were lined with rich trees, and a few cars navigated the slalom between the apartment buildings. These buildings were no longer grey, but blue, yellow, pink, or decorated with paintings and wooden fixtures. I could hear birds, hissing tires, the wind, flies, and the scuffing of a paper cup along the rough concrete beside me. I took off my helmet. It was, without a doubt, ordinary air. I hung the helmet over my stomach and looked for Rho again. I said their name several times, getting no response, nor any reaction from those running errands in the streets below. I repeated the exercise until I realized I had been defeated. I sat down and organized my gear more comfortably. The sun was hot. The moon was visible. We'd never seen it in the zone, even at night. I kept thinking I could see Rho nearby. You can't blame me. They could be anywhere, for any reason. Eventually I stood and trudged down the stairs. They were clean. The doors all had names and numbers, and I could hear music thudding about the place. In the lobby I saw notices posted that failed to mention any zones, monoliths, monsters, or magic. Someone glanced at me through the glass door, looking away and carrying on without missing a beat. That wasn't the typical reaction to a man wearing someone else's body and carrying an assault rifle, if that need be noted. I opened the door and said "excuse me" to their back. They didn't respond the first or second time. In my mind, I knew that the place I was in didn't really exist, and perhaps those who lived here simply thought the same of me. Why bother to perceive what isn't real, eh? Fair enough. I had enough rubles in my bag to apply for an apartment here, live a peaceful life. I often think of that, of how possible it could have been to be left behind here forever. That is not what I did, for that is not why I left such a wonderfully miserable life in my world to begin with. Some things can't be solved with a stable future, according to Rho. They never would be. And Rho got their information from some high and mighty beings indeed these days. I walked into town, ignored entirely. Attempts to block the path of others had them scowl and sidestep me like an unwelcome puddle. I literally could not complain. Thus a robot human whirred into town, kept alive by the power of an empty in another universe, and only I found such a thing at all remarkable. I kept swinging my head around, ready for Rho to reveal themselves among the more crowded shopping streets. I reached a paved central plaza built over the top of a parking garage. There was a tall hotel and a building that looked like a few overturned boats stuck to a roll of toilet paper. The Pripyat Technical Arts College, it claimed to be. After a while standing outside it, the first tear in the dream emerged. A lady in a wide blazer clacked out from the double doors and approached me with her eyes fixed on mine. I let the G36 hang on its strap to be more polite. "Would you mind coming inside?" she asked when she arrived. She had already turned to begin leading me back. I took a step forward. She set off quickly back to the doors, my questions mere wind in her sails. She led me inside and towards a gaudy reception desk striped with bright colours. Once she was behind it, the moment was over. I was gone to her. Another receptionist eventually shook her head at me after a barrage of questions washed across that awful desk. Or perhaps she was reading her paper a little faster at that moment. I began searching this college for another lead. I believed at the time that Rho was taking me somewhere with a playful charade, and that I might even be trapped in their imagination. Not so far-fetched. First I tried a phone on the wall. Some familiar numbers got nothing but dial tone. Then I snatched a newspaper from the hands of a man leaning by the door. He grunted under his breath and folded his arms. I scanned the pages and found not a single detail about anything occurring outside of Pripyat. Frustrated, I pushed the paper back into the man's arms, which he stoically ignored until the thing was left crumpled at his feet. Next, I walked up some cold stairs and along a hallway with hefty self-closing doors at regular intervals. Each had a round window to spy through. Students were looking at a blackboard or a gesticulating lecturer. In one, they were lazing over the long pews with papers, blueprints strewn all around, cigarette smoke forming a storm front towards the windows. The green orbs carried on their way behind the glass. I thought very briefly of the many people I had once known who had disappeared to places like these. It had been only Zedric and I of our old clique that went into the army. Was that right? Rho would have known. I think they were there. I felt I shouldn't dwell on it. Those days were right as the SSR was being renovated. Perhaps everyone else rode that momentum all the way to some foreign private contractor gig. Memory lane and the hallway came to an end. There were double doors with a loud voice echoing beyond. I hesitated to open them, not wanting to disturb the proceedings. This struck me as a consideration I hadn't needed to make in a long time. I couldn't remember ever making it, although I was sure I used to be more civil. Opening the door felt refreshing somehow. I entered at the bottom of a slope of benches. I was right beside the speaker. His presentation was fairly well attended. I climbed up towards the back and sat down. The bald speaker strode up and down the stage in a colourful blazer. Behind him were 3 blackboards. Left and middle were blank, while the right had a thick vertical line dividing it into 2 halves. A squashed cross shape met this thicker line in the middle. The right-hand side was labelled the future, the left the past, and the areas inside the west and east quadrants of the cross were both marked with empty sets of curly brackets. I had some catching up to do on whatever course I was enrolling myself in. I tuned in to what the lecturer was saying. "Imagine a circle," he commanded, with accompanying hand motions. "This circle, this impossible circle, can be imagined to contain that which is known. The perimeter, the border here, around here, is the boundary that the world bashes against. It leaves imprints in our circle, challenging what we know, and we try our best to smooth out that border, again using contents from elsewhere inside the volume. No, our area, let's keep it simple." He was holding a piece of chalk, yet evidently was not going to draw this diagram for us on the board. I noticed the people in front of me were drawing it themselves in their notes. My battle helmet clanked against the metal leg of the writing shelf in front of me, and I instinctively tried to act natural. I thought about running back to that roof and looking for Rho. "It doesn't matter how much bigger, a lot bigger or a little bigger, you can see the problem we're going to have," the lecturer said. "The more perimeter you have to your circle, the more contact you have with the world, with that which you don't yet know. And the more imprints you must work to smooth, here, all over. The matter of size is not arbitrary in this respect, for there is only so much smoothing one can do, even if their circle contains enough material to explain everything, as it were. The structure of the analogy here is that knowledge brings a level of awareness and a discomfort with awareness too, a supporting structure. There are places one can go, intellectually, that are precipices over the unknown, from which there is no backing down. To dwell there is to be ruined, intellectually speaking. I'm saying this to you not to scare you. I don't want you to go there at all. And you won't. This is caretaking on our part. I simply need to impart to you a tool in your mental arsenal that runs contrary to everything you've probably armed yourself with so far. The sheath rather than the sword. The lesson is that it's okay not to understand the world. It is better to not understand the world. And when you see the void of what you don't understand, you brush it away. Shrink your circle, it's getting all creased." He began laughing, and the others appreciated the hidden humour. The lecturer placed his hand in the west quadrant of that cross on the diagram. "It's all out there. Let it stay there, and let us stay here," he said too quietly. "If we achieve this, we shall be the envy of our departing masters." This mention of masters had the class all raise their hands towards the big windows down the left side of the room. I almost did it myself. It was the direction of the power plant. I would realise that a few minutes later. Now the lecturer began marching up and down the benches, commenting on the drawings people had made in their notes, even exchanging a few heated comments on the strength and meaning of his wrinkly circle theory of everything. I wished I had Rho to talk to about it. We could have placed bets on what subject we were supposed to be learning. The illusion broke again when the lecturer reached my row. Everyone else quietened down and stared off into the distance. The lecturer was looking right at me. I was forced to look back. "And you," he said after inhaling loudly. "I presume you understand all this already?" "Yeah," I said, averting his gaze. "Since you're here now, we'll need to adjust the schedule for this semester," he said, addressing the whole room. No one turned around. "Our masters had a more complete curriculum for us, originally, I will not deny that. Alas, we know what we know, eh? I hope that much has sunk in by now. I would have liked to collect more things together. I kept telling myself I would get to it." The lecturer went on, muttering to himself as he descended the stairs. Everyone in the room was looking at each other, smiling, hugging, and shooting me the odd glance. I stood to leave, my weapons making a racket. A pink light flashed. The big windows shattered and glass showered the room. The students screamed at first, but it quickly turned to laughter. Injured or not, they rose their hands to the window. Out there I saw the orange plume of an emission at the power plant, closer than ever before. It sounded like water was being shot into my ears, and looked like fire consuming my eyes. The shaking was not illusory this time. The benches were rattling, papers were taking flight, and everyone began to move towards the stage as best they could. They called to me to join them. More people were coming in from elsewhere. Before I made a decision, I was swept along by an influx from the rear doors. So it was that I was squeezed into a huddle at the stage. People began to sit down, transmitting the motion throughout the crowd. We were in front of that minimalist diagram of past and future. The green orbs floated in through the windows. The blasting of the winds out there didn't bother them. The students were happy to see them, and called out various things to the effect that they were ready to join the aliens. I didn't consent to this association, nor did I make any attempt to leave. We waited the emission out, like good stalkers. Some students were singing a rhyme over and over. All that was is lost, we knew it would be. All that is we grasp, as it should be. All to come's reset, like never could be. Goodbye, goodbye, old and new me. It was an infuriating mantra. I was more than ready to get out of this dream. Fortunately, something like that was exactly what the good citizens of lost Pripyat had in mind. As usual, the emission faded away. I had my echo detector and thought of checking for its final trembles. However, the people here seemed well attuned to the moment of safety. They all got up at once and made for the doors, saying to each other how they would meet again shortly. Someone asked if I was going to be there, and I heard that I was. It was easy to discover this alluded-to location. It was a few blocks over at the main highway. This road ran east to west throughout the middle of the town, off to civilisation in one direction and off to the NPP complex in the other. Here the townspeople gathered with luggage and song. People were handing out food and drinks. I stuck to my own. There were guitars and accordions being put to good use, and plenty of smart shirts and dresses were on display. The luggage was piled in between the various groups: clothes, household supplies, and even some tents. A bit much for a street party, and not enough for what this really was. I wandered through the crowd, catching the odd smile or easy glance. The festivities went on for the best part of an hour, more and more people joining at the fringes. myself simply resting amid the chaos. At some point it reached some preordained size, and suddenly everyone hoisted their luggage, pets and babies, then turned east. A band was playing somewhere ahead of us. The crowd followed it forth, and I bobbed along in the current. I looked back again and again at the apartments as we passed them. I couldn't sense Rho. This was light on my mind, with the mood of the procession always swelling at each call of the instruments. The old lady in front of me was struggling with a large suitcase, so I offered to carry it. She refused, with the steely resolve of one who'd seen too much taken from her. I asked her name instead, and got nothing in return. Still, I nodded along with the loud drums, and wondered what Rho, or whoever's dream this was, would show me next. And there was another lead to follow. If we were to walk to the power plant in this world, could I cut through to the real one? If Rho had a plan, it was certainly that. The birds of the forest watched cautiously as we ran our racket down the road. We passed open and empty military checkpoints. They had the old flag on them, from the SSR. It dawned on me that we had to be in the past, when Pripyat was taken after the incident, or when Pripyat upped sticks and walked out. Who knew that I was walking with them all those years ago? My legs whirred me along until we reached the plant complex. The tall chimneys on the reactors had an iconic look, yet they were actually dwarfed in the skyline by the larger chimneys and factories in the plant's vicinity. Plenty of heavy industry had been sited here to draw from the reactors cheaply. As such, we were looking upon a maze of roads, canals, wires, gangways and offices, with the admittedly huge power plant facility ensconced deep in this brick and mortar mountain range. We passed the tall border fence and its abandoned guard post. Ahead there were emergency vehicles scattered around in front of several stories of offices. The road deeper into the facility was cordoned off with military vehicles, the air above them waving in the midday heat, although my earnest watch claimed it was 8:30 in the evening. People speculated on why we had stopped. I saw people trying to enter those offices up ahead, bashing on the doors and windows. I thought I'd go up and take a closer look. This failed. My first step brought me to the roof of that office, looking down over the crowd. "There you are," a familiar voice said. Rho bounced over to me. "There you are," I shot back. "What is all this?" "We're ready to go back to our space," Rho said. "I need to warn you though that in that space I'd been having a hard time. It's not like here. Things changed a lot and quickly. What's happening to you here had changed me there, mixing up sectors of time. I think that's it. You'll see. Are you ready?" "Rho, I have no idea," I said with a smile. "Excellent," Rho said. They pointed down at the crowd. "You'll be down there. Up here this is an illusion. And down there isn't." "Don't be like this, bro." "You saying that to me?" "Alright." "I'll miss things being like this," Rho said quietly. They waved their arms about dramatically and snapped their fingers. They inspected their fingers after nothing happened. Then, something happened. I was back down among the crowd. The crowd shone orange, their ghostly bodies writhing like smoke. The sunless sky was yellow and so close that the chimneys of the complex were wedged into it. My nose almost shuddered to breathe. I needed my helmet. I could hear the lungs of the universe shutting down, although this sound was buried in the symphony of screams the ghosts let out, first in sorrow, then in agony, and then their memory was taken away. Their luggage and clothing littered the roads, shifting around as dropped pets made their escape. I was not alone. Nearby, a group of zoners were climbing over the BTRs blocking the road to the plant. They shot at something on the other side. They looked back and saw me. A few shots were fired, one lodging into my artificial ribs, yet I was recognizable enough to break through their panic. To my right, to the east, I saw the lake that rained upwards, hovering like a moon. Ahead, among the corpses of several monoliths and some pieces of animals, sat a shadowy Rho, playing with a looted helmet. They looked over and smiled at me. I was able to breathe and ignore the stinging. We, both of us, had reached the power plant. The longer I took in the scene, the less it seemed like the NPP of Stalker legend. No, it was far more fantastical than that. I stood atop the BTRs blocking the road. Further along, the zoners were hurrying through a park of shipping containers. The plant's service entrance was cut into the side of the main building far ahead, almost far enough to be obscured by the yellow fog falling everywhere. We couldn't see the forest outside the plant. However, we could see movement on the road in. Figures swaying around in groups. They were civilians with enough grit, luck and strength to climb over the bodies in their way. They were shouting and pouring at the air in front of them. What did the call of this place mean to them? Even now it didn't matter. Our one goal remained the same. I called for Rho to hurry up and follow me. They were still poking around the ghost's luggage. They didn't seem to hear me. I pulled my helmet up to call louder. Rho waved and pushed off the ground with all four gangly limbs. They ran towards me. My hands tightened around the G36. Whichever that was, it was not Rho. Not my Rho. Yet the similarities were undeniable. Their steps were heavy and unbalanced, the scarf at their thigh flapping about chaotically. They stomped to a halt in front of the BTR and exhaled in a horrifyingly familiar way. "Going all right, Zed? Zig?" they said up at me in someone else's voice. They held out a hand to be hoisted up. "Rho," I said. "Don't complain. This is what's happening. It's part of the wish for both of us, isn't it?" They smirked. "You're really the real Rho." "Real as ever. Real in a different direction, let's put it like that. Now lift me up. Not much time left. That fog isn't fog." Finally I offered a hand and brought them up. Lighter than expected, heavier than before. Rho pointed a thumb towards the lake that rained upwards. "You see how there's a bite taken out of it back there?" they said. It was true, the ball of floating water was incomplete, like a waning moon. "That's where space runs out now. ET wants to close everything they don't like off from the rest. It's our fault, so let's keep it quiet. So yeah, the moment that wall reaches us, we'll be split off from the rest of the universe. That's what it is. Not sure if we'll live, or whether it will matter," Rho claimed, and who had reason to doubt them now? "Those people out there. There are 100 humans left alive. We're gonna be the last too. Promise?" they added. I nodded and turned to begin our pursuit of the zoners. There had been more gunfire ahead and behind. The zoners were lunging around to shoot at things I couldn't see. The civilians behind us let out shots at whatever was back there with them and screamed when that didn't work. "Mutants, poltergeists," Rho said. "Doesn't concern us. Move fast and keep your heart in check. I can't stop you regressing while I'm like this. No violence, not even the thought of it. Right, bro?" "Right. So drop that stuff. We'll move faster." They meant my weapons. As insane as that might sound to one imagining this scene of final danger and death, once Rho had suggested it, I could do nothing else. No, it's more like that I knew I would be doomed if I didn't, and Rho had simply reminded me of a truth I knew intuitively. I threw the tools away, keeping my vest, artifacts and helmet to stave off death a little longer. I felt that if I jumped I would fly so high I'd slip through the fog at the end of the universe up there. It was joyfully easy to leave it all without a second thought, after everything. I'd not even imagined it possible until a few moments before. My luggage joined that gathered on the asphalt as my body carried on its way, although much of my real body was already long since consumed by the erasing fog. I began to run. Rho called out after me. They couldn't keep up. That was new. I slowed to a jog and Rho bounded along behind me. All we had to do was make it up the road. Blue bolts of lightning flashed across it ahead, arcing from invisible sources towards the reeling zoners. Those were poltergeists, carnivorous artifacts, and they were the least of our troubles. I could hear the padding footsteps of bloodsuckers flanking the road, probably too afraid of the poltergeists to get closer. There was a dry canal to the left that was bursting forth lesser beasts, dogs, pigs, deer and rats. Some looked relatively normal. All we had to do was get ahead of the pack. The zoners called out to us, as if we'd answer. They began sprinting afterwards, following our lead. It wasn't supposed to be a lead. I glanced over at the lake that rained upwards. It was about to disappear entirely. "Look out!" Rho called behind me. I saw it at the last instant, the telling ripple of space hanging in the air ahead of me. I lunged left and took the poltergeist's lash on my shoulder. Pieces of the skeleton exploded off like reactive armor. I could keep running, but I was worried about Rho. They had things under control. When I looked back, they were sailing upwards, with their hands gripping some nothingness. "Keep going!" they shouted down to me, whizzing overhead. I got the suit really moving, feeling something at the damaged part digging into me with each swing of my arm. "I'll take care of everything," Rho hollered as they swung side to side. I knew they would. We approached the service entrance. It had tall green double doors on rollers, one partially open. A road to the left ran a few hundred meters to the end fog. The road ahead was blocked by wrecks, yet surely went somewhere equally non-existent. Instead, we turned in towards the place that shouldn't exist, the Chernobyl sarcophagus. Rho grunted and pulled their hands apart. The poltergeist exploded in a mist of blood. That they had bodies was widely rumoured, and even I had seen pieces of flesh seemingly fall from nothing during firefights. Rho was covered in confirmation of it. They noticed I was staring at them. "It's so you don't have to. Don't worry about it. I'll be fine once we're through this," they said. "Finally pulling your weight," I mumbled. It was something I'd hoped to never see, but who can pratter such complaints in a place like this? We traced the edge of the door and looked in through the gap. There was a dark chamber with another set of closed doors not far ahead. "I'll check inside. Keep a lookout," Rho ordered. Before I had time to argue, they span around the door and pushed it closed with stupendous power. The door rang like the crash of silverware on the floor. I grabbed it to open it again, pulled, and saw even more of the skeleton shatter off me, smoke-smelling dust scattering down my flank. I'd been too hasty. I switched to the suit's better arm, then felt a fleeting weight press me against the door with enough force to paralyze me. It pushed me off and had me rolling away. I couldn't hear any running water. I looked back down the road and saw that the zoners were coming up on us. I needed to get in and get the door closed again. Before I could shout to Rho, I saw the bursting bubbles of monolith magic deposit a squad of their troops all over the zoners. They wrestled and exchanged bloody shots, the bubbles returning to spirit them away in the middle of the struggle. Further back, I saw some civilians were being taken in a similar way, although their struggle was with the animals and mutants reaving all over the road. No more came from that canal since the opposite bank was gone. I estimated that there was a minute or two left. I saw no more of Monolith, the Stalkers, or civilians, so that meant my job to keep watch was done, right? I took a run at the door and banged on it. It jolted aside, and Rho poked their head out. I froze in fright. They were dripping with sweat and 10 times as much blood as before. "It's quiet now," they said. I pushed the door a bit more so I could fit through. I got my act together and went in. "I sorted everything out. Don't look. Come on," they went on. I could tell there were bodies around me, even without looking. Rho put their hands on the chin piece of my mask and made me look at them. As I blinked, the blood and scars on their face disappeared. "Now, close the door. We won, bro," Rho cheered. I pushed the door closed, raised my head up, and followed Rho over to the second door. I thought I was going to be led through it, but they actually threw stones at me to get my attention. I realized they'd swerved off to an alcove cut into the concrete. There was a hatch in the ground with a wheel lock. There was writing on the wall around it, in Russian, warnings and memorials. This was where those fated to die in the plant back in the first days of the incident were sent down. Rho pulled the shrieking wheel around. "I already know the way," they said. "We're going to make it. We've already made it. Look at me. Even this is more than I thought I'd get, and I've a whole wish to make." As they began to lift the hatch, I grabbed their arm. "What are you going to wish for?" I asked straight. "We already know that, don't we?" They smiled. "You've changed your wish. We've both changed our wish." "Tell me," I'm going to save you, me, the world, and the aliens. Every one of them. I'm what they need, Rho recited. I let go of their arm. You're what I need, idiot. Remember why we came here? So that you could help me, I croaked. This is going to help you. It's going to finish helping you, then you won't need help. You'll see really soon, right in here. We can rest if you like. The world won't end in here, since we're inside. We've all the time in the world. Yeah, we really do. This is all of it around us. They coughed for the first time ever. Maybe it'll be less dark and messy inside. The hatch revealed a ladder through a dark shaft, though steady light made promises at the bottom. I went first, as per tradition. Simple staple rungs that felt disconcertingly soft. They held until both of us were in a hallway. There were signs everywhere from the plant's operational days, hoses and empty tanks all over the floor from that final day, and enough radiation to get the bubble dancing, the legacy of the beacon that somehow put a cosmic target on our pitiful world. We passed through it all to some stiff steel doors. Together we budged them open enough to slip into a new hallway that was crumbling and drooping to the right. At its end it fed into an auditorium of death, the concrete tomb of the broken reactor vessel. Fragments of the metal sphere lay against each other at the mouth of a pit covered in spots of white light. The ceiling of the sarcophagus high above was fractured, and through gaps we could see a certain place. You wouldn't know it. As for the sound, absolute silence. Only our footsteps echoed around the rubble of the old plant building. It was blissful. I felt compelled to remove my helmet. After all, Rho was fine, and indeed the air was cool and refreshing, if a little dusty. We climbed forwards, seeking the opposite side of the room. Why? Because Rho commanded it. On the other side there was a raised flat area, clear of debris, with a single light on the ceiling burning down into the middle of it. Center stage. I agreed to check it out and pinned the idea of climbing into the reactor vessel below. That's where I would have hidden the Wishgranter if I were E.T. I wasn't. However, there was someone in this room who arguably was, and if you can believe it, I'm not talking about Rho. In the middle of this stage, invisible until we were close enough to see a clear sky patch on their arm, was a man sitting in a plain wooden chair. "Are you the Wishgranter?" Rho immediately asked, cancelling my storming thoughts on what to say. The man shook his head and beckoned us closer. We obeyed. "I'm hard to describe," he said. I recognized the voice, and paired with the clear sky gear, I recalled who this was. Cold, the old master of the 1,000-yard stare. "You're alive," I said to him. "Thanks for saying that," he replied slowly. You aren't really Cold, the stalker, are you?" I ventured. The man shook his head. "I can't be sure. I will tell you what they call me among my compatriots. They designated me the rear guard. It makes for a noble name, almost disguising the sorrow of it all. But I'd be a fool to be anywhere but here. I know that at last. Thank you, both of you." I felt that whatever I was talking to, it was the same agent that had stood next to me in that lecture hall. Speculating further was useless. It was time to turn to Rho and hear it all right from the font of the unknowable. "The rest of them have moved on," they said. "They came seeking a way to be free of their pain, the pain they don't understand themselves. That pain of knowing everything except how they know everything and how to stop, because it hurts them all in ways they didn't think possible until it was too late. And here they thought they could go back. Instead, they move on and try to forget us deliberately. They will cut us off, and all of this never happened. The Wishgranter will never have been put here, and our world will no longer be part of the universe. That's the real end here, isn't it? That's my quest. That's what this was all about." Rho turned to me. "And it's about you too. I will save the aliens, and they will save you. Through me." "Through you," I echoed. "My wish will Solve everything for us, and for you, rearguard, and for them, the ones who left. That's the power of a wish. It means we're in a universe that cannot be predicted or understood. There's only one problem. E.T. warned me that if I make my wish, I'll be doomed to eternal agony like them. They don't know what I'll wish for, though, so I didn't believe them. But I have to ask, is it safe to wish? I thought the aliens, you, didn't understand it anyway, so who's to say what will happen? The aliens understand everything, but they can't remember why, the rearguard began, leaning forward over his knees. This is a sore spot for them, their past. Before their first wish, it's all not gone, but it doesn't make sense to their melded minds, melded with the universe state, all knowledge, a library that contains no notion of wishes or the possibility of existence before or after a causeless event. I'd say that it's not that they don't understand the past, it's that they're not permitted to remember it. This is the rule of the universe they now encompass, and while they wish to change it, their understanding of the great power they must wield for that is slipping away. It is essential that no particular course correction be made by any one of them. Remember that for one to know is for all to know. Their minds, their mind, can't conceive of the impossible. It's a mind designed to know everything, and that which did not or will not occur, the universe of missed possibility, is a void. They fear it, knowing only that it must exist in the minds of small beings like us. And glad they should be that it does, since that is the key for their salvation now. To roll the dice on the wishes of the dust that knows only itself, yet dreams of anything it pleases. With a pilot like that, the wish granter might make any universe. It might make the universe the universal mind desires, if it would even know it when it came about. Or, as they are keenly aware, it might doom the deterministic path of the universe for mere trivial changes, twisting the alien minds and achieving nothing. Now we see the problem with us. Indeed, they place their faith in the wrong minds. This should have been the end of it and the end of us, to seal off the breach and pinch away the mistake forever. Then they found you. Something they could feel, communicate with, something that, while impossible, was still conceivable to them. A fibre of hope from the world of all that can't be, one they tugged closer, only to be confronted with the edge of their understanding for the first time they could ever remember. The whole species endured torturous pain, knowing what others must not know, carrying on in service of this new science of hope, the discovery of an endless lifetime. Ultimately, they cannot imagine what will happen when you approach the wish granter. They feared it. They wished at times to wipe it from the future. Always it returns, though, from the edge of that unknowable strand of causality the wish granter's very existence burns into the universe state. It makes me angry to think about it. Angry on their behalf. I've no thoughts of my own, really. Whether I'm supposed to welcome you or kill you, I think it's no coincidence that I can't remember. Since we're close to being written into history immutable, any actions we take shall have to be decided upon now. Decided upon by you. Both of you. I suppose that's true enough. I shall step aside. I may be able to leave in the final moment, since I am, too, one of those lost fibres. Were it up to me, I would be snapped apart and remain here with the scrubbed memories. It's hard to stand after all this time. May I ask for a hand? I pulled Cold up. They stepped away and gestured towards the chair. Sit, when you are ready, he said. I had hoped he'd say something to make his lecture sink in. He barely had the energy to remain standing. Cold. Rearguard. What is the wish granter? Did you make a wish? I asked. I got a piercing look, and the words, How in all the universe am I supposed to answer that? The past goes away when you break the chain of cause and effect. It's simple, Rho insisted. I sighed. Yes, my wish, all my various wishes, they were almost irrelevant in the face of this useful side effect. Remove the past, eh? Without my past, I had no need for a wish whatsoever. I considered then if I should dedicate my wish to a good cause, like Rho. I was filled with nerves. I felt like the moon was falling upon me, and I'd been tasked with deciding whether to sidestep this way or that in response. Something changed. Rho had sat on the chair, teeth arcing ear to ear. Around them I noticed a blue material, glass or crystal, and transparent silicon. It formed a pillar from ground to ceiling, blocking off the chair. I asked Cold what was happening, but they were walking off. I felt a fire in me. I shouted for them to come back, in vain. I looked at Rho. They were looking at me. Their mouth was moving silently. I closed my eyes and concentrated. Rho could always be found in my memories. That was their promise. But there was nothing. I felt completely alone. My hand was grabbing at where my pistol holster had been. I pushed myself against the crystal and made a wish. That wasn't how it worked. Instead, the whole thing lit up, and Rho seemed to cheer and shake around in the unassuming chair. All time outside of the present moment was suspended. We were at the intersection of those flat lines of chalk. Rho began to wish, which restored the notion of past and future. I raced to remember who I was. No, I had all my memories still. I watched Rho nodding and speaking. They spoke for far too long. They certainly weren't making the wish we'd agreed upon, although maybe I didn't want them to anymore. With a jolt, I realized I could use my wish to undo whatever Rho's wish had been. I couldn't dare think about it. I knew what I wanted, I thought, and after all the time I'd had to think about what I'd wish for, I was still stuck on the idea I'd had when I first heard of this thing. What choice did I have but to call for the life I'd wanted when I was a simpler man? Was choice even the right idea to invoke in the pale light of the wish-granter? This light faded, and I realized that the glassy wall didn't exist. Rho exhaled and stood up. "This isn't real," they said. "I've made my wish now. What you're experiencing is the leftover reality from that. Only you see it. Make your wish quickly. That's the best option. And there are things I want to say to you. But I'm gone, really. I'm gone." Rho was gone. I shuddered and threw myself into the chair. I hardly fit thanks to the suit. I could unwish whatever Rho wished. I knew it. Everything was stinging. I remembered Rho. They still existed. I went all the way back to the beginning. I knew I shouldn't, yet I had to see if anything had changed. I saw them for the first time. All seemed normal. It played out in 2 dimensions, bloodlessly. Yep, that's what I remembered. Did that happen? No, it certainly didn't. Right, Rho? I was in the glass. It gave me as much time as I wanted. I made my wish. I wish that the part of me I called Rho was real. I stood from the chair. It was warm. A blue sky beckoned through cracks in the sarcophagus. "Rho," I said. "What?" Rho replied. Their voice was normal again, as it had always been, really. They were standing beside me, pulling on the sleeves of their undersized jumper. They seemed light and immaterial, as I was used to. However, the face didn't look right. They looked a bit like me. "Rho, I made the wish. The one from before we came here," I said. "I can tell. There's only one little problem," Rho said, beginning to walk away. "In the world where I am real, you are dead. So what has the wish-granter done with that? Precisely what the aliens have done to everything else that didn't make sense. No, the best way to put it is that all this concerns the things they don't want to make sense. I don't suppose this makes any sense to you, does it?" "You're real. The real Rho," was all I said. I was following Rho back towards the ladder to the service entrance. I'm the real Rho. That much is true. And you're what remains of the real Zig. What remains of the timeline in which mistakes are not erased. Refuse. Rho, what are you talking about? I can't hear your thoughts anymore. We'll have to get used to this. I'm speaking aloud, Zig. These aren't my thoughts, and you aren't even listening. You must have gotten used to ignoring me all this time. No, I shouldn't be angry. It was probably my idea to ignore me anyway. I'm clever like that. You don't need to call me Zig. You aren't Strelok anymore, are you? I suppose if everything bad's been strained out of me and concentrated into you, then you are. Strelok was a bad man, Zig. You tried to become him when we came to the zone, to feel stronger. I stopped you, and we got Zig, the in-between. Do you remember what our name was before any of this? I felt like I did, yet I didn't want to reach back and seize the answer. I followed Rho up that ladder. I should note that so far, nothing about the power plant's decrepit appearance had changed at all. I must have inherited all your memories, all the ones you used to hide from me, Rho said as we climbed. Every moment comes naturally. It was like this when the miracle machine found me. I could change the universe, all on my own. There's a feeling of communion, that's the word. It's like I'm bathing in the essence of what it means to be a human, moving around like this. Yes, if someone saw me, they'd say, that's a human. Obviously, it's not going to be possible to test that anymore. Rho pulled me out of the ladder shaft with a broad, sturdy hand. They closed the hatch. The door to the exterior was open. None of the corpses were here. Did the world end? I asked, too lightly for such a question. Yes, Rho said. What else was there to say? So, where are we? I said. I don't know. There's one thing I can tell about it that I imagine you'll be blind to. Those ropes. There's one left, and it ends with me. You don't have one. That's reason enough to believe the aliens understand my gift to them. Rho, I breathed at the door to the world. It was bright and warm. What did you wish for? It was growing hard to speak, with reality setting in. I gave every ET their own hosted consciousness, like I was for the old us. They use them well, I suspect. They aren't stuck knowing everything, knowing each other anymore. It makes me laugh to think of what they'll make for themselves, those god beings, desperate to be something lesser for all the misery lessens with them. They're different to us in that way, huh? Still, they aren't going to completely forget everything, even the bad parts. They know that's stupid. Another difference, that is. Well, you can see it for yourself, can't you? Rho beckoned me outside and pointed above the sarcophagus. Clear as the day itself, the cenotaph scraped the cosmos. A cocktail stick for the whole planet. A clear sign that even in 1,000,000 years other passing aliens will notice and think, ah, there's a spot for a picnic. I wonder what this place used to be. This isn't the world we saw though, through the glass, the secret visions, I said. No, it's your world, Rho said. They waved me on, as I had done so many times to them. The service road to the plant ran off into the woods to the south. The gates were open and were crawling with greenery. The whole area was overgrown, hard to recognize against my blood-soaked memories from what can only have been a few minutes earlier. It was the zone with a lowercase z. All the alien stuff is gone, except for that thing, I said. That means their plan worked. They were never here, Rho said. They flung a hand over their shoulder in the direction of the cenotaph. They left a reminder, and I think a seal, so alien magic remains in there. Best leave it alone. That's the whole point of it. What does it seal? You, mostly. No, there are more people alive here, I expect, somewhere. I don't think everyone died, and anyone who was inside might be alive. You know how it goes, don't you? You'll have to find out for yourself. We both will. I don't think we both will. Yeah? Yeah. That it? No word games for me? Is that what you want from me? Oh, Zig, it's always so simple with you. I'll miss you. What? I stopped walking. We'd almost reached the gate. Rho kept going, shaking their head. After shouting at them a few times, I was forced to catch up. The warmth of the rushing air reached me even through my stupid suit. Rho, tell me what's going on. Where are we going? I demanded. 2 different places. Rho stared me down with a look I hesitate to describe as contemptuous, yet I've no closer word for it. It hurt. What? Didn't we get what we wanted? I said pitifully. Yes, we wanted to stop being you, to stop being Strelok and Rho, to go back to how it was before Rho. You remember all that time we spent with Zedric, don't you? We both wanted that again, although it doesn't come so naturally to me anymore. Point is, making me real was the only way of doing it, and it will be done. I'll go on and live as the old you would have wanted over in the real universe. I honestly didn't think you would still be here. It must be how the universe state works, keeping erased pasts around in their own compartments. Kind of them, I think. I hope I'm right about that, and I hope I can get out. You're going to the alien world? I asked. While what Rho was saying made more sense in retrospect, at the time it was all too difficult to take in. To the real world, Rho corrected me, a correction that made less sense than my hazarded guess. You see, I felt that the world I was in was very real at the time. That wasn't the important part, though. The important part was that Rho wanted to leave me. Or Rho was going to leave with their own me in their possession, and leave whatever I was to be preserved in this zoneless world the aliens had left behind. It seemed important to them that it be like this, and whether I thought otherwise was irrelevant. I didn't understand, and I couldn't. I wouldn't. We walked for a long time in silence through infuriating nature, undisturbed by ET, nor humans for that matter. I finally came up with a potent question. Will you remember me? Rho ummed casually over this, then answered at length. I won't remember anything, I don't think. I'll think I was always alone. That's what it's like for the aliens now. I fixed them. They can be anyone inside, and create anything freely. They started to become their imagined consciousnesses, the ones that no one else could hear. From there, they cut away at the path from one to the other. Who they were, the one they wanted to escape, stops mattering. They don't have to hate it anymore. Isn't that amazing? They've forgotten why they became gods, and why they wanted to go back. They will lose their powers quickly. It's good. Or else there would be more wishes. The universe has been through enough, trust me. You and I, we only saw a single speck of the universes they tried to rebuild. I don't understand it, and neither do they. Did it even happen? No. Our old saying, eh? No, nothing happened, and we should be grateful that it wouldn't matter even if it had. I'll be happier once I leave, or at least our old friend Cedric will, and it was all for his sake in the end. I don't know what will happen to you, Strelok, Zig. If the humans are still around, you'll be wherever they are. That could be nice. You'll be a monster to them, I'm sure, and I don't know if I should even let you live. But I will, bro. So see if they'll let you in their bunkers, or wherever they might still be alive. You know, the aliens thought it was cute and fascinating that we distinguished between inside and outside. They wanted to learn that for themselves, how to make a completely arbitrary distinction. It was only possible if you didn't know what the space around you really was, what it was made of, what it could do and would do. Such a simple, pitiful vision, a power the god things we flagged down envied in us. They learned it so well that I think where you are now, that's like being inside. You will never, ever leave this place, even though it would be trivially easy. The whole universe state, forward and back, it's all right there. But you draw a line, and the word for one cannot be likened to the word for the other. They loved that idea. They loved a universe that could be tamed like that. So utterly imbecilic, their salvation. It's really a happy step forward. Although actually some of the time spanning behind them came back for ET, so not all forward. Sorry, I keep talking. You're not hungry or anything, or dying? I can't tell now. Don't kill yourself if that's what you were thinking. Although I would say that, wouldn't I? Rho, I growled. What are you doing? My final fundamental question, asking why, would be astronomically futile. There's a seal on me, on you. keeps whatever we've become apart from Zedric, our real past. He remembers us, for now. He'll only be alive in my world, the one I'll go to. A different Earth with a few salvaged specimens. Only Zedric will be free there. Don't feel sorry for yourself, that's what I'm saying. We've all agreed it's the best course. Plug up the past, the source of the pain, no matter what it is. Then be something new of our own creation. So imperfect and broken like flakes of an old eggshell. We'll be happier in our little circle. And the seal will remind us that once things were much grander, much worse. Yes, it's fun to think about. To burrow in the darkness and say goodbye. Refreshed, living wherever our thoughts cast us. I mean, I'm not exactly one of them, the aliens, but I'll be something they can understand at last. I hope it runs both ways. I'll not even be human, but that's okay. I don't want to be. No point in that now. I suppose I'll have to take what Zedric wants into account too. Rho was beaming through ludicrous streams of tears. We'd crossed the cleared perimeter and reached the fenced tree line of the woods. The road carried on without so much as a twinge into the shade. I couldn't take it anymore. "How far back did you know this would happen?" I burst out. You're betraying me." "Strelok, you betrayed me, remember?" Rho calmly replied. I couldn't look at them. "We did all this because of mistakes you made. You don't know what the mistake was, because I removed that memory for you. And afterwards, I will forget that we went through this at all. Likewise, the aliens broke the natural universe state when they invented wishes and made themselves one tortured mind. My wish removes that awful memory for them, and that seal holds back the knowledge that they went through this. You see, we're all following the same rules. I don't think you can complain about it." I couldn't. I began walking on into the forest, but this time Rho was the one standing still. I circled back, then orbited them with steady, quasi-electric steps. Rho was trying to ignore me. "This is shit," I eventually said. Rho shrugged. I wanted to hit them or hug them, but they weren't solid matter. I missed my chance at the plant. I walked from one grassy verge to the other, tapping the fence posts marking the wood line. Then I came up with another final question. "Will I remember you?" Rho let out a surprised chuckle. "I think it would bring you a lot of pain if you did. So, don't. Take it from me." "Alright," I gulped. If my legs hadn't been mechanical, I think I would have slumped to the ground. "I'll not last long," I whispered. "Don't say that. By that logic, neither will I. It's like dying, really. I think a better fit is to say reborn, being real. I don't even know what life will be in the real universe for the new me. The present, or back then, I might not even be alone. I could dream everyone else back and start again with no past. The universe is fine with that, apparently, since that was the whole problem the aliens started when they ended the chain of cause and effect. They told me all about it, but it's hard to really. It doesn't matter. So, don't kill yourself, that's what I'm trying to say. You might have an okay life here. As for me, all I know is I'm to be in the main section of the universe state. That's the outside, if you like. That's what current beings will consider real, even though this place here will be perfectly real for you, so don't worry. I think talking about it only makes it seem worse than it is." For the last time ever, I agreed with Rho. I was brought out of an entranced stare into the soul of the road by the scraping of feet. Rho was turning. They began to walk away. I could hear every footstep, and nothing else. I felt my borrowed organs twisting around. I wish I could say I was frozen to the spot by the weight of the moment, but I was fully able to move, to run, to jump twice my height, and live without half of my organs. I was powerful, and I watched Rho walk off freely, feeling that I was approaching the surface of the sea at last, and simply had to keep that mask over my face to live another minute. Eventually, Rho turned out of sight. My body rumbled. I clawed myself around to face the woods. There was pain at first, because my body didn't want to breathe. I forced it, swelling my chest and stomach as best I could. Some clockwork somewhere connected, and the process carried on automatically. I had done it. I had breathed on my own. I had no mood to speak of, I noticed, which was a blessing in the circumstances. It was time to live some kind of life, with the freedom to see if I could end it all at will later on. A sensible plan. It struck me that everyone else had died already. What did that mean for me? The world would be mine. Would I live in it? It didn't matter to the real me. I was the tumor that had been removed, cursed with the memories of the healthy being I'd aspired to be in chopping the tumor away. That must be it. Besides, Rho thought that others might be alive somewhere. Rho. Who was that guy anyway? I had a glancing notion of it, and the notion brought my mind to Yosefka. I thought I had better open up that case in the back at last, the one that must have slipped my mind all this time. It had been a gift from Zedric, I thought. I had been rude to ignore it for so long, although how long it had been was both hard to gauge and ultimately not important. I could get there on the road I was dawdling on, and the weather was good. It was still morning. I didn't feel hungry, or anything really. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and I don't know what happened after that.
So